Nice.
Hey, everybody, welcome. Our special guest today is Sam Bankman-Fried. Just kidding, we didn't get there. Wrong show. But hey, welcome to the back room and the green room of DisrupTV. Here with my awesome co-host, Vala Afshar, our producer, Hannah Hawk, and more importantly, we're going to talk to our awesome guest chair. So going in reverse order, Richard, what are we talking about today, and where are you calling in from?
Yeah, we're talking about leadership today, and I'm calling in from Rochester, Minnesota. It's where I work at Mayo Clinic.
The home of the Mayo Clinic. Amazing. Awesome. Tiffany, where are you calling in from? What are we talking about today?
I'm calling in from Los Angeles, California. It's raining today, and we're going to talk about the state of sales. Yeah, I know. It's raining. Who thunk? Crazy. We can turn our sprinklers back on. It's very exciting.
You got to wipe that oil from your windshield wipers first. Awesome. All right, cool. All right, well, very cool. So, and then of course, we'll be talking about the CXO Business Confidence Survey Constellation Research produced. We'll give a little bit some insights there. And then of course, we will wrap it up. So Hannah, all yours.
All righty. 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. It's weird to see myself without hair. My name is Vala Afshar, Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce, and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on Twitter at DisrupTV Show. Send your questions to Ray, myself, and our distinguished guests, and if you're a blue check verified, we'll answer. It's my pleasure to introduce you to my co-host. We'll answer all of them. It's my pleasure to introduce you to my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO, founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World, Surviving, Thriving in the World of Digital Giants. I see him on TV every day. I see him on Fox Business, Yahoo Finance, Bloomberg, CNBC. I think he's one of the top futurists. You can follow on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with my awesome co-host, co-founder, Vala Afshar, the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce. He's also the author of The Pursuit of Social Business Excellence, and executives around the world pay attention to every one of his inspirational and insightful tweets. When he's not hosting, keynoting, or leading events at Salesforce, you can find him speaking on business TV outlets like Bloomberg, and more importantly, posting insightful analyses on ZDNet. But it's not about us. It's always about our amazing guests. And of course, we have a comeback. Who do we have here?
Listen, I have, your book, but I get limited distribution copies of our next. So one of the advantages of being one of her mentees is I get advanced copies of her book. Tiffani Bova is Chief Growth Evangelist at Salesforce, an awesome company. Author of a Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Growth IQ. And again, I was probably one of the top 100 people to read it. And host of What's Next podcast with Tiffani Bova. Celebrated keynote and member of the Thinkers 50 list. The last 2 times the list has been published. Tiffani inspires people to think forward and be bold and take action. Tiffani was named one of 2020's top virtual keynote speakers by ReadWrite, and is guest on Bloomberg, just like yourself, guest on Bloomberg, BNN, CNBC, Yahoo Finance. Again, makes the rounds on all the big media outlets. She contributes to publications like Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Entrepreneur, and many other publications. Her podcast, What's Next with Tiffani Bova, is an iTunes all-time business management bestseller and a top sales podcast. In fact, breaking news, she's working on a second book. Tiffani is a top Twitter influencer, was named one of Inc. magazine 37 sales experts you need to follow on Twitter. I follow Tiffani. And LinkedIn top sales experts to follow. I follow her on LinkedIn. And the top 100 women in tech and one of the most powerful and influential women in California and perhaps Hawaii. Probably both states. Prior to working at Salesforce, she was a distinguished analyst and a research fellow. You can probably count the number of fellows at Gartner on one hand. On Twitter, you can follow Tiffani at Tiffani_Bova, so clearly an early adopter. Welcome back to DisrupTV, Tiffani.
Thank you for having me. It was so great to see the opening video, and I was in it. So thank you, guys.
We know how to market the show. We know how to,
That's awesome.
We know all the big minds. We know all the big minds.
All the big minds, the big thinkers, right? And you're definitely one of those thinkers 50. One of the things that you've been talking about for quite some time is really about growth, right? And there are growth trends that are popping up. So the real question is, what are those growth trends that are popping up for 2023, where it looks like we're going from a culture of abundance to a culture of scarcity very, very quickly? But is that true, or is growth still in the mindset of everybody?
So it's a great question, and one I ponder often. I can say this, as Vala mentioned, I had the book Growth IQ that published a couple years ago. I mean, it was 10 paths to growth, but lo and behold, I pretty much had left employee out of the book altogether. I spoke about it a little bit in the customer experience chapter, but I by no means gave it the full sort of topic coverage that it really required. So it was a couple years ago, I was standing on stage in Canada, and I said, I didn't think it was a coincidence that Salesforce is a great place to work, according to, great place to work lists across the globe. If it's not number one, it's in the top 5, one of the most innovative companies in the world and the fastest growing enterprise software company. That connection between those things I felt was fairly obvious, and many people had said it for decades. But I hadn't really seen a whole lot of it to show the proof, that causation or the direct correlation between that happy employee leads to happy customer, leads to greater growth. And I think since the pandemic, the great resignation, quiet quitting, whatever you want to call it, companies have started to spend far more time and attention on making sure that they can get their employees satisfied and engaged in multiple ways. So I feel like that is something that has come into focus for organizations around the world. And that's really where I've been spending my time when I start talking about growth.
So, and you led, so it was a realization that an amazing best-selling book, I think it's funny, like, I don't know if this is like trivia, but I think it's like the best business book in Korea right now. It's just like, what? I mean, was that on your bingo card, Korean best-selling book?
It was.
Okay. So that's how much success you've had. I mean, people around the world they're actually universities teaching classes based on the book now, which is just like stunning. Not surprising, but again, when you're going through the process, I'm sure you're not thinking this is going to be, mainstream curriculum for the other side of the world or everywhere around the globe. So you recognize that, okay, I gave these 10 important chapters to fuel growth, but I missed or I didn't give enough justice to the employee portion. So you led fairly extensive research. I think, it was Edelman, Columbia University, Stanford University, a bunch of folks that are, expert research organizations, and you guided them to better understand and quantifiable measure, like you said, correlation, causation of, because we've heard this, happy customers, start with happy employees.
Happy employees,
Talk about that research and, what were the ahas? Any surprises in the findings?
Yeah, what I want to be really clear here, there's so much to employee that human resources manages, but I really wanted to focus on that moment that matters between when an employee touches a customer, whether that's in the products that they design, whether that's the web pages that they design, whether it's a call center, a sales rep, marketing materials, whatever that may be. That moment that matters is when an employee needs to deliver those compelling and amazing experiences that, by the way, we've been talking about for decades. I was part of the team at Gartner that made the prediction that the chief marketing officer would spend more than the chief information officer on technology. And it was like blasphemy when we said it. Everyone's like, absolutely no way, never going to happen. We didn't say it for technology's sake. We said it because we knew customer experience was going to be this category that brands were going to start to compete against as products became more commoditized, not on high-end, complex, long sales cycle kinds of solutions or products being sold, but really where can that, experience make a difference? And I usually say, if you went to a restaurant and the food was spectacular, but the service was terrible, would you go back? If you were in an Uber car, right, do you remember what you paid for the Uber ride? Or do you remember, was the driver too talkative, or the car was smelly, or the music was too loud? You always remember that experience sort of longer, and we make decisions every day in that way. So how do we create an environment for employees to do that? So as Vala mentioned, we went out and did US-based research, and then we went out and did global research. And lo and behold, we found that brands that got it right had a 1.8x faster growth rate than those that didn't get that connection of employee and customer correct. And it's not in things like compensation. Most of it, we could talk about this for hours, but most of it was in tools. The average enterprise has 900 or so apps, and only 28% of them are integrated, which means your employees are having to do so much more effort to do their job, and more importantly, to serve those customers.
1.8x. Wow.
Yeah. And then we had one retail study, and it was 1,000 retailers. They have 1,000 storefronts across the US. There's only a handful of stores that have that in the US. So you can probably figure out who it is. But when they really honed in on improving what the store personnel, the tools they used, the training they had, the shifts they had, the manager training that was in place, they saw a 50% increase in revenue per hour per head. So it was significant.
So if I recall, one of the findings was that if you're not focusing on the employee experience, you could be leaving as much as 50% revenue on the table. And I shared that stat with several, trusted advisors, and some of them thought it could be even more, which was surprising to me because I thought the number was pretty big to begin with.
Well, what's interesting is here's what I normally hear. Well, if it's so obvious, why hasn't everybody been doing it?
Yeah.
And we don't really have anyone who looks at employee experience in totality. And I'll just pick Salesforce as an example. Look, I started by saying, right, great place to work, most innovative company, fastest growing enterprise software company. We only stood up an employee experience team 8 months ago. So we have employee success. We have a strong HR organization, obviously, as a great place to work. We pride ourselves on great culture, but still you're always looking for ways to improve. And the pandemic absolutely shined a light more collectively and broadly across the market at how little attention we had been spending on our employees over the last probably 2 or 3 decades, really kind of at the turn of the fourth industrial revolution. We started to see so much focus on automation, so much focus on digital transformation that we kind of left the employees behind as we really pivoted towards making sure that customers had all they wanted. And I think Ray mentioned, right, he's going to be talking about his customer experience awards and what they found from their research, right? Everybody is squarely focused on that customer experience and instead leaving that employee experience behind. So it led me to, want to write the second book, which comes out next year. We'll be focused all on this topic.
Oh, great. Ray, you're on mute.
Ray, rookie mistake.
Yeah. No. A lot of noise back here. So if you think about employee experience and you think of processes and the technology here, like we're really building for what we call machine scale, right? And we're taking the employee out of that human scale. And so the question is, what happens when you think about the employee experience and the processes and all the things that are happening behind that, right? I mean, there's so much friction, and that's where people are trying to take that out of the area. But you also talk about the fact that there's machines and humans working together in harmony as well, and really how to get the employees to shine. So talk a little bit about that, really how technology is augmenting where employees are working versus working against, or sometimes working for, having the technology work for the employee as opposed to against the employee.
Yeah, as luck would have it, last week I was actually speaking at a session at the World Economic Forum in Geneva, Switzerland, and we were talking about their stat about 50% of employees will have to reskill themselves. And that was really about that to Ray, to your point, right? That automating to remove that human touch for scale, for productivity, really trying to accelerate that, and how those jobs will have to reskill, right, to be prepared for what's coming in the future. But there is also the reskilling of jobs that are not going to be replaced, right? That augmentation of take some of that laborious tasks off my plate. Pick, for example, sellers. 66% of their time is spent on non-selling activities, but really, didn't we hire them to sell? And that number has remained fairly constant for almost 15 years. And at the same time, they're not achieving quota, but 50% of the time. And in that time, imagine all the improvements we've made to marketing technology, to sales technology, to customer service technology. Yet with all those advancements, we've not seen the amount of time spent selling going up. And so this is where, to your point, right, the process side of the business, the operational side of the business really has to have this new mindset of it has to be focused on that employee, whatever role they're going to do. Where and how can we use technology to augment that to give them success now, right? Not 5 years from now or 3 years from now, but today, to allow them to do those things that, once again, going back to that employee experience, that they show up and want to do, that they're committed to do, that they're satisfied, they're engaged, they get the value and joy out of what they do every day. And opening 5 applications to do your job in a simple, quick 90-second customer service call is not it.
Right.
It's not it.
Right. We started the conversation talking about your projections of 2023. I look at just the last 12 months. Go back 12 months ago, and mortgage rates for a new home could be in the 2s, low 3s. We were talking about a potential full employment recession, where in the tech space, for everyone looking for a job, there were like 3 jobs available. And now fast forward to the last month. Mortgage rates in the 7s, in the tech space, tens of thousands of staff reductions, perhaps hundreds of thousands. I can think of tens of thousands with just 5 or 6 companies. So it seems like a really quick pendulum shift to employers looking for efficiencies, looking for optimizations, automation, and not specifically driven completely by growth. What are your thoughts about, which one of these chapters are going to really matter next year, where there's maybe more wartime CXOs than peacetime CXOs? Because frankly, the last 10 years, it's been peacetime CXOs. Money's flowing everywhere, and everyone's a unicorn, and you can choose wherever you wanted to go. I just don't feel that that's the climate now, and I don't see that changing in the foreseeable near future. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and here's what I would say, Vala. I'd say that ultimately, if you look back at the last recession, 2008-9, we saw those brands that doubled down and didn't cut costs to sort of find and realize profitable growth far exceeded when we came out the other side of it. So I'm worried now that companies are making the wrong decision in cutting costs because it's inefficient. Now, if it's just too many people, that's a different conversation. But if it's inefficient because the hard work hasn't been done on the infrastructure. So for example, this past week, Frontier Airlines, a US-based discount airline, completely shut down its human-based call center. It's gone. You cannot call. You cannot speak to a human. It's either going to be a bot, it's going to be, online chat, it's going to be WhatsApp or via social media. And so all of it, by the way, according to the article I read, right, was about cutting costs. It wasn't about, hold on a second, what do customers expect? How has that changed over the last couple of years? Instead, it was completely a cost decision. And if you run a call center as a cost basis, you're always going to make the wrong decision because it's not a cost center, right? It's really an opportunity for growth. So I think that this goes to the heart of what you were talking about. The decisions that you make right now, I'd say number one, if you're talking about those paths, right? Customer-based penetration, taking care of those customers that you have, but then also getting back to basics and optimizing your environment. Digital transformation, we've spent billions of dollars on technology. And Ray, you probably know this stat better than I do. What percentage of those digital transformation projects actually deliver the intended result? What percentage? I don't know the number. Ray, what is it?
You're on mute.
You're lucky if it's about 17%. So
Okay, so there you go.
Wow.
17%.
If it's
Yeah,
17%.
lucky. Okay, so you're lucky. So what's happened is the tech stack has gotten fat. You know, I was Eloqua or Eloqua, however you want to say it. I was their beta client in 2001. Literally, I was their first or second client ever. And back then there was like 6 marketing technology products. The second of which I was a beta client was Constant Contact. Like, I'm really dating myself here. So there was maybe.
So what were you on Goldmine? I'm just kidding.
Listen, I used to use Goldmine and a single user version of Act. Like, you know, and I used a DOS-based PC. Anyway.
Oh my goodness.
Now we're going back. All right, here we go.
Okay. How about WordPerfect? Let's just call it the way it is. Anyway, so if you think back then, there was maybe 8 marketing technology products. Now the MarTech that's tracked by the analyst community is north of 9,000. So there's no shortage of technology to do all these things. There's no shortage. And so where we've failed is in the rigor around process, in the rigor around consolidation and optimization, instead of throwing technology at the problem, really doing the hard work. So to your question, Vala, this is the time to dig in and fix a lot of those things, which may in fact cost you a little upfront more than you want, but in the long run, right, you are far better off in the end. We've just finished doing a state of sales report that's coming out in a week. And one of the things we really dug into was this tech stack for sales and marketing, and how it's gotten so fat that just the people who have to work in those systems and tools are only spending 28% of their time selling, which is insanity.
So much time wasted just keeping those things in place. Nothing is ambient. It is a challenge. And I think, people are reducing their spend right now. We're hearing that and actually working with folks. So definitely some amazing things. But hey, we're with Tiffani Bova, Global Growth Evangelist at Salesforce. This has been some interesting trends on the 2023 growth trends. Thank you so much. And of course, we're looking forward to what you're talking about in employee experience. And you can follow Tiffani at Tiffani_Bova on Twitter. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you
so
much.
for having
Growth IQ. Get Growth IQ in Korean. So
I think it's the #1 business book in Korea.
Yeah, it's the #1 business book in Korea. Yeah, it's pretty impressive. We're like, wow.
That's awesome. Okay, our next. So we've talked about technology and culture and clearly the important role of leadership, and we're going to spend the next segment learning about what it means to be a great, strong leader. Dr. Richard Winters is author of You're the Leader, Now What? Dr. Richard is a practicing emergency physician, Dr. Winters, at Mayo Clinic, and author of You're the Leader, Now What? Leadership Lessons from the Mayo Clinic. As Director of Leadership Development for Mayo Clinic Care Network, Dr. Winters facilitates retreats and delivers programs that train leaders at healthcare organizations worldwide. Dr. Winters graduated from Mayo Clinic Alex School of Medicine. He's board certified and resident trained in emergency medicine from the University of California. Prior to his work at Mayo Clinic, Dr. Winters served as managing partner of Physician Group, chair of emergency medicine, president of an 800 physician medical staff, and CEO, co-founder of a managed care startup. You can follow Dr. Winters on Twitter at Dr. R. Winters. Welcome, Dr. Winters, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thank you for having me. That was a little long. I think I'm someone who cares for patients and helps leaders. That's just a simple thing.
I love that.
Well, we're so excited to have you here, and it's awesome, right? I mean, when you think about where you're, all the work that has happened over the last 3 years, and more importantly, all the work that you've done before that, understanding leaders and understanding where they fit with fears and worries, right? How does that impact decision making as you think about that and what you've written in your book?
Yeah, it's been a bit busy lately, hasn't it? The past few
years.
Yes,
it has.
In medicine, right? And so there's been a lot of changes. And so as things are changing, I think there's a couple ways that leaders can approach things. We want leaders who are agile, who can make decisions on one hand. On the other hand, we also need leaders who can bring lots of different perspectives together. And as we're in these moments of change, there's oftentimes fears and worries that are underlying what's going on. And the leader themselves may have those fears and worries. And then certainly the individuals that they're working with have fears and worries. What often happens is we start to move forward, as we start to push for the change without acknowledging the fears and worries. And then those fears and worries are like the monsters in the darkness that will come up and just chew up strategy. And so I think it's It's actually very important to acknowledge, to understand the fears and worries, and then to use those sort of as the energy to move forward and figure out how you can kind of decrease those fears and worries from happening.
Now, do you use those fears and worries to question best practices, or you use those fears and worries as a tool along the way? So
yeah, right. And so during times of change, we have best practice there's things that we do on a day-by-day basis that are very helpful for us. So for me, we have a trauma patient that comes in and we have 20 people in the room. Each of us knows what to do. And we have these things that we all go step by step, these best practices that we do. But sometimes we find that these best practices no longer work, and we need to recognize that. And so sometimes our best practices turn into, they're actually past practice, right? Best practices by definition, past practice. And so you'll have these individuals in the room on the one hand saying, but we already know what to do. And then others looking forward and trying to innovate and saying, you know what, that no longer holds. And so fears and worries are one of those things that underlie moving forward. We also need to destroy these past practices that no longer work.
I recently discovered your Twitter feed, and I'm like, wow, this guy knows really how to tweet well. No, I love your lists. They're very thought-provoking. One of them recently, you said, let's talk of burnout. More discussions about autonomy, fairness, values, resources, process, relationships, self-acceptance, workloads, recovery, culture, opportunity. Yeah. Get to specifics, measure them, discover them, improve them.
Yeah.
Wow. In 280 characters, wow. So I guess writing a book, you can, brevity is the soul of wisdom. I can see it in your tweets. How can leaders recognize burnout? Emergency physician, obviously, you live in a highly intense, life or death scenarios often. And how do you recognize burnout and its impact on your colleagues, your environment, your surroundings, the performance and the quality of life that you're trying to improve when you're working?
Yes, so burnout is a huge thing, and emergency medicine, EAS, it tops the list. And so, if you go online and you look at burnout, you'll see a lot of individuals just kind of blaming the universe, blaming their leaders, blaming the attorneys, blaming the president, all these sorts of things. And how helpful is that to be the victim? Really, we have difficult situations, but and I'm an executive coach. I coach many of our leaders. And one of the questions I would say is, so given that, now what? Are you going to stay a victim, or are you going to try to find some ways to push forward? And so I think from an organizational perspective, it's really important, burnout. This isn't just like, touchy-feely sort of stuff. If our colleagues are burned out, our quality is going to decrease. Satisfaction is going to decrease. We're going to have increased churn. And so it's one of these things that we need to do something about. As an emergency physician, I take care of patients. I look at vital signs. And so as organizations, revenue, cost, burnout, these are the vital signs. If we're not looking at them, then we're going to have a sick organization.
Wow.
And so but we just can't talk about burnout. We need to be talking about then, so what do we do given this? And so given this, I think the language is more towards well-being. And so we look for those things where we're aligned in purpose, both organizationally and individual. We look for where we can have autonomy, where we can make changes, where we can discover the things where we can actually find some efficacy and do something about that. Many organizations measure staff engagement and things like that. Many organizations also get those numbers and then do very little about that. And so I think the goal is for us not to say, yes, we're burned out, but now what are we going to do? Let's move forward.
We had behavioral research professor from Stanford on our show last week, Professor BJ Fogg, and he said behavior equals motivation plus ability plus prompt. So he said, if you want to drink a glass of water or multiple glasses a day, he keeps a glass of water in front of him throughout the day. So it's a prompt for him to drink more water, as an example of use of prompt. What are some prompts? Like, is it an exit interview for most companies before they realize that there's burnout in their environment? What are some of the prompts that leaders should be looking for in real time or pseudo real time, so that they realize before somebody quits, or before somebody gets sick or is a low performer, that they're susceptible to burnout?
I think there's a problem here with language. And if you, I give a talk about burnout to all of our new physician and scientists that come through Mayo Clinic. And so it'll be 150 people at once. And I'll ask questions like, so how many of you can name 6 causes of metabolic acidosis? Everyone raises their hand. How many of you can name the 12 cranial nerves? They all raise their hand. How many of you can name the components of eudaimonic well-being? Crickets. All right. So as physicians and scientists, we know that, all these little details about ourselves, but we don't know even we don't have a language. We don't understand the specific domains of well-being. And so I think for a leader, that is one of the key things, is to have some language, some framework to work off of. And so for me, I love the eudaimonic well-being. And as a physician, I put together a mnemonic, pagers. Yes, we still wear pagers. It may be weird to you, but on a shift, I'll have 3 pagers. So pagers, P is purpose. So an alignment with purpose. A is autonomy, our sense that we're being heard and we can affect the environment. G is personal growth. Like, we're in this organization and we're wanting to do more and more. E is environmental mastery. Do we have the things that we need to get the job done? R is relations. And so are we having an organization where we're relating with each other well, or are we kind of bickering up amongst each other? And then S, which is the final thing, and I see this at all levels, is actually self-acceptance, which is our ability to accept we make mistakes and we can move on from that. And so as a leader, as I'm working with a colleague and I sense that there's burnout, I may be able to explore each of those areas and try to get a sense of how can I connect them back with their well-being? What are the things that I can do? What are the resources I can kind of allot to them to help them move forward?
Related to that, how do leaders actually recognize the limits of their expertise, or even get to a point of, being able to create a shared reality as well, given all the things that are happening in the background from what they're doing? Yeah.
So as an emergency physician, right, I go into a room and I see a patient, ask a few questions, and then what do? I go out and I write orders. Like they don't call them suggestions. I write orders, right? And there's some things that aren't working so well, and I become a leader. Let me step into a conference room with a bunch of people. I'm going to write orders. It's not going to work out so well.
No,
right?
No, that's not going to work.
I do have expertise, and so I have a perspective, but so does everyone else that I'm working alongside. And so behind my perspectives are also my blind spots. And so it's so important. And, I think you can easily see a physician, a surgeon as being someone who understands and knows what to do in the moment. But how do we then put that expertise down and try to develop shared perspective, to try to see around our blind spots and collectively get all these different points of view first before we start to decide what we're going to do? Most of the meetings I'm in, we jump to like the way forward. And so we're making decisions behind a single 1 or 2 individuals' kind of perspectives and their blind spots. Much better to have a leader try to gather some information in these times where we have some time and move forward with a shared perspective.
Everything you say makes so much sense, and it just appears like common sense. But I have to tell you, as I'm listening to you and I think about my career, as early in my career, I was fortunate to manage large teams, and I was a shitty manager. I
don't believe it. Don't believe it.
Well, so I would study a particular domain, think about it consciously, subconsciously. So when I would be in a meeting and somebody would present a point of view, I was very quick to either agree with them or disagree with them. And if I disagree with them, I would and here's why. And so I was doing most of the talking. I didn't have a beginner's mindset. I didn't have humility in the way I approached, because I felt like, man, I'm putting in the reps. I've thought about this thing for months, and here you are just playing devil's advocate. So I just felt like I had a short fuse, low temperament. I don't know how to describe it, but I felt I could justify it because I was in the gym putting in the reps. So how do you, especially when you're a physician, like, you've got deep expertise, how do you encourage team members to be comfortable to challenge Dr. Winters,
right,
who's a certified leadership, retreat expert? How do you welcome people to want to, share their point of view when they're in the presence of, a world-renowned expert?
Yeah. So there
are no egos in medicine, so don't worry about that.
Yeah. So there was a great paper out of McKinsey Quarterly a few years back, where they were talking about what's most important, process or analysis. And so for me, I can have spreadsheets, all this experience, all these things. I've gone deep. I know the information, and this is what we need to do. That's my analysis. But again, embedded in there is my blind spot. And so this analysis, it may make sense. I've already thought, Vala, what you think, and Ray, I've already considered what you have to say, but after careful consideration, I've come to the conclusion you're incorrect, and we're going to proceed with my plan. Like, that can move forward, and it feels so good because I have all the details. But again, like, how do we move forward in these times that are really complex? Is we need to pull together, because each of you has a perspective of the world that I do not have. And so it's actually process. How do we develop a process where we develop this shared reality before we decide the options and before we go to way forward? Like, we want to row forward as opposed to rowing backwards. And so you ask, the leader asks, so what are the perspectives? And sometimes you're in groups where people feel free to share, and you write these things down so we can see it. Because sometimes someone will repeat it and you'll be like, yeah, we've already written that down here. Is there anything else you want to say? You do that. Yeah. Sometimes people feel unsafe. And so, a great thing about Zoom is you can have some breakout rooms and you can have people share things together. Then you can have group report outs. And that way it's not coming from Winters or anyone specific. And then things kind of bubble up in that way.
When did you have this beginner's mindset or servant leadership approach to your in your career, in your work? Did you have a mentor or a sponsor that you looked up to and you said, wow, the way there's kindness and grace in how he or she manages my work, I feel better about myself, better sense of belonging, mattering? Or was it just naturally you because of parents' environment, you always had this appreciation of good leadership?
Yeah. So a lot of it is similar to you. Like, I felt like I was a great manager and stuff, but then I realized that I was not a good manager. I was not a good leader. And so a lot of it's the pain points that I myself was feeling and the things that I saw that were not occurring in the way I wanted. That's number one. Number two, I think we've all sat in those meetings where you're with a leader who's like, Ray, what do you think? And then you say what you think, and then they're like, you feel like an idiot. Why did I even speak up? What's happening here? And then you're wondering, like, what am I doing wrong? Maybe I should have said it in a different way. But actually, they were never listening to you. And so it's that those two things, like the pain that you just feel, we all feel as we're facing these complex situations. And then you read a lot and you try to figure out there must be some better way. And then the nice thing about executive coaching is, so as an executive coaching, leaders at all levels, the most senior leaders, I'm seeing hey, you know what? They're experiencing this too. And they're asking these questions like, now what? What do I do? And so with the book, one of the things I hope to do was something that they can just open up when they're facing these really difficult situations, when their colleagues are disagreeing and they're all bickering and they're looking to them like, what do you do? When they're having one-to-one conversations with someone who's burned out, when there's fears and worries, how do you surface these sort of things? So common. We all experience it, but yet we don't necessarily have the framework to think about it and like to get through it.
You also mentioned some important pieces, right? How do you spark engagement, right? How do you get people to even participate? Because back to your point earlier, some people might be afraid, right? They might be in an environment that doesn't support that or make that easy to happen. And then the other piece that was interesting in your book was really talking about thinking before reacting, right? Instead of just jumping right in. Right? How do people do that? Because there's different styles of leadership. Some people are very quick to make a decision. Other people are very pensive. And we looked at different leadership models in the past. Like, how does that tie back to a person's leadership style?
Yeah, totally.
Is most thinking reflexive versus reflective? Like, right. do great leaders purposefully pause before they share their guidance?
I think you're right. I think it is a purposeful thing. And so, like, imagine you walk into a room and on your right is this baby, and on the left is an angry wolf. Which one are you going to pick up? Right? Like, I think most of us are going to say we're going to pick up the baby. This is good for us to know. Like, it's going to keep us from getting hit by buses. But now you're going to go to work and they're going to ask you some really complex thing, like, how do we best alter our schedule? How do we best, alter our product to meet the demands of customers and those sorts of things? And we still have these like reflexive, this is what we're going to do based on our experience. This is normal. But then this is probably not the best thing. Like, my expertise here has some limitations. I have some blind spots. And I think our best leaders, our best individuals are able to then say, wait, whoa, I can put this expertise out here, but now let me step back. And there's a metaphor that Ron Heifetz out of Harvard used, which is the dance floor and the balcony. And this is the concept that as we're going throughout our day, right, we're on the dance floor and we're hearing the music and we're responding. And if someone says something, we can kind of predict and we're going to respond next to them. It's kind of the synchrony that we have. But then it's helpful, though, at times to go up onto the balcony. And as we look down on the dance floor from the balcony, we start to see things differently. We start to see maybe other aspects of the room that we had not seen when we were there on the dance floor. We start to see ways that we might move or react differently. And our best leaders bring their colleagues up onto the balcony so we can start to look at these things in different ways. It's a very purposeful thing.
I like that perspective. I've watched Ray do breakdancing, and it's quite a scene. So Dr. Winters, again, our guest last week talked to us about tiny habits, things that we could do right away to develop behaviors that can align us to our goals and objectives. What do you hope people get from reading You're the Leader, What Now? What can they do as maybe a New Year resolution? Or although we had Tom Peters on the show and he said, excellence is not about next year, next month. Excellence is about the next 5 minutes. It's the next email, the next meeting, the next presentation. Yep. But are there things that we could put into practice so that we can become better leaders and hopefully leave people better than when we found them?
Yeah. So I think our best leaders are able to look at themselves. I mean, they're able to analyze, like, how am I doing? They're able to look at how they're leading others one-to-one, and they're able to figure out how to lead groups. And so I think in each of these spaces, there's something to do. We've been talking about in leading groups, how do you gather, kind of gain shared perspective? And so I think tactic number one is to get off the dance floor, get on the balcony, and try to figure out how to, like, what are other people thinking? What are their perspectives? So that's the group situation. I think for the one-to-one situation, we want to stop being individuals who know and start being coaches. And so so what does a coach do? So we hear about mentorship versus coaching. As I'm mentoring a colleague, I'm up on the balcony alongside them, and I have a lot of experience, and I'm telling them what I see based on my experience of what's going on in their situation. So I'd say, Ray, hey, I think you should consider this. Based on my experience, this is what I would do, or this is what I'm seeing. When I'm coaching, I'm not helping my colleagues see through my eyes. I'm helping them see through their eyes. And so when a colleague comes to me and they're burned out, a colleague comes to me and they're wanting to advance in their career, I don't think it's so helpful for me to tell them what I'm seeing through my eyes. I think it's better for me to be asking questions to help them make sense of the world and try to find out what's best for them. And so I'm going to coach. On the one hand, I hear you saying this. On the other hand, I hear you saying that. How do you put these things together? What have you seen work? What would you like to do? Just a very different perspective. And the cool thing is that for both of these situations, whether you're leading one-to-one or groups, you don't need to have the answer yourself, but you can have others. You can help others facilitate the best answer, and that is going to be the best answer. And then
I love that.
And then as we're thinking about ourselves, the same thing. I mean, there's things that I do that, 6 months from now, I'm going to think I was an idiot for doing. And it's going to require me getting on the balcony and thinking, what was working and what's not working, and trying to change myself and be more effective.
Smart people often change their minds.
Yeah.
That's my experience. And I love the distinction you make between mentor and coach. And I love the way that you talk about, helping you, teaching you how to think, not what to think. And that's important. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah. Oh, no, I was going to say this has been very, very helpful. I mean, really, in terms of leadership and leadership styles, it applies to all types of leadership models that you have in place. I think, the checklist that you have there, I think a couple ones that I really like was align behavior with values and drive and achieve results, because all that talk and all that hot air is, you're an ER surgeon, right? You're like ER medicine. You're like, we got to get shit done now, right? And that's very, very different, than other folks where there's no bias for action, which is part of it. So, but hey, thank you for being here. It's Dr. Richard Winters, author of You're the Leader, Now What? You can follow him on Twitter at Dr. Winters, DRR Winters. And of course, more importantly, get his book on Amazon called You're the Leader. So thanks a lot.
Thanks.
And happy
Congratulations.
holidays.
Congratulations. Thank you. Okay. I got to pause a bit because, anytime you have like two great authors, practitioners, business leaders, back to back, a lot of things to unwrap. But we're not done with unwrapping because, Ray, I want you to talk about the CXO Business Confidence Survey. Again, you can't watch the news today and not see presence of confidence, in some cases low confidence, in a lot of cases low confidence, because of the uncertainties that exist at the macro level, micro level. So can you talk about starting with, who did you survey? And it's called, the CXO Business Confidence Survey. Who did you survey?
Yeah, Vala, it's very, very important, right? We have a base of 1,000 CXOs in our network. They're built for our top transformation leaders, folks that are part of the Constellation Executive Network. We took a small sample and slice of those folks. About 78 individuals filled this out. These are chief digital officers, CTOs, CIOs of some of the biggest companies around the world, mostly North American focused in this cut. And we wanted to ask them, what do you think? So in October, late September, we said, hey, how are you feeling? What does revenue look like? How are you with profits? Are you hiring? Because since May, coming out of the World Economic Forum, they've just been trying to psych us into a recession. And so you keep hearing recession's coming. This is bad. Everything's in. But then the numbers pop up and it's like, oh, unemployment's up, right? Unemployment's down, sorry. Hiring is up, right? Revenues are still being made. Earnings are still making their calls. And it's really confusing out there. So we said, okay, let's just do this. Let's take a cut and see what happens.
Do you have a sense of how many industries were represented in the nearly 80 surveys that you conducted?
Yeah, it's about 14 different industries, including public sector. We looked at a wide range: consumer, energy, telco, tech, of course, right? Retail, CPG, manufacturing, trying to figure out what's going on, healthcare as well. And we wanted to know where people's sentiment were. And these were the people that were building the budgets and putting the budgets in play.
Give me top 3 findings, abbreviated summary of what you found.
Yeah, so what was very interesting is when we asked the question about, hey, what do you expect in the next 6 months for revenue? Almost, I'd say, about 80% were significantly increased or moderately increased in terms of revenue. So they thought things were going to go well. So we said, okay, what's happening with profits? And we had about 61% say, profits are going to be up. So whether it's significantly increased or moderately increased. And then we asked him about hiring. What are you doing with hiring? It was about 9% was significantly increased, but 46% said it was going to moderately increase. And that's pretty huge, right? So we're like, oh, okay, all things are rosy. This is going to be great. And then we said, okay, so what's going on here? What are you betting on, right? Why these things, right? Why are you betting on these things? What are the most important business issues that are in the back of your mind? And overwhelmingly, 50% said labor availability and quality. We're not getting the right people. We're not getting them on board, right? They're not the right level of certification but we're just dealing with it. And then the second one was interesting. Normally it's like, oh, we're worried about cybersecurity, worried about all this kind of stuff. It was operational challenges, right? They just couldn't get their operations back up and running. And then the third thing was innovation at about 26%. And then about 24% was inflation and interest rates. And then the one that's usually number one was cybersecurity at about 21%, almost 22.
Wow. 8 out of 10 revenue growth, 6 out of 10 efficiency and profit, and 47 and 8. Yeah. So about 58% looking to hire at some capacity, but the challenge is finding the right person for the job. That makes sense because, again, it's a more decentralized world. So you just maybe have to expand your net to find the right talent. Where are they investing? If you're in these 78 CXOs, 14 industries, where are they investing?
Yeah. So what was strange was normally you'd see investment categories focused on, cloud or 5G or like some of the traditional areas. But this year is very different because of all those business issues. Automation was number one. 72% of those business leaders were focused on automation. Then AI, because they wanted the exponential advantage, and from what we can tell. And then, of course, analytics, like they're used to the real-time information. And it was about cloud. So 72% on automation, 58% on AI, 54% on analytics, and of course 53% on cloud. And then after that, there was a steep drop off to like big data, blockchain, metaverse. I mean, some things were like metaverse was in the single digits, 5G was in the single digits.
Wow. So any of it surprise you? Did any of the investment priorities surprise you? Did something stand out that you would disagree with? So you're a CEO of a company. Let's say your company is now an enterprise, thousands of employees, tens of thousands of customers. Is it automation followed by machine learning and AI, followed by I don't know what the third one was. It escapes me.
Analytics.
Analytics. Are those three that should be top three for all sectors?
It is, especially as we're going into a digital world. I mean, those are the three basics that are required to be able to do that. Analytics, ask the right business question. Automation, get that information and insights built into the organization. AI, so that we can actually build a business graph and the intelligence, pull all that tribal and urban knowledge together, bring the ability to bring all your insights so that you can actually take action at institutional and longitudinal level, right? All those things are there. And that's been pretty exciting. But the most surprising question was, keep going.
Yeah, so speed, personalization, and intelligence seem to be currencies that matter to all these CXOs. All of them seem to want to deliver value at the speed of need, which means you do have to invest in automation. You have to improve decision velocity with analytics. And I was with an academic yesterday, and he told me that 90% of information our human brain processes is visual. And on average, it takes only 13 milliseconds for us, the human brain, to process a visual information, and that's 60,000 times faster than text, and 65% retention of visual versus only 10% when we hear information. So this is why we do our video show, so they don't only hear us, they see us too. So what's the sentiment when you ask these 78 executive CXOs in terms of 2023? It seems like it should be positive, no?
Yeah, they should be all excited. But then we asked that final question, right? So do you think 2023 will be better than 2022? And the answer was no. 66% said no, right? So after saying, hey, we're going to spend more, revenue is going to be great, profits are going to be amazing, it's all going to be rosy, they're like, no. And so this was the part that was the most interesting. We're like, what's going on here? And we had a CXO meeting this morning with some folks, and we were just asking what's going on. They're like, well, we submitted these budgets, and the CFOs are like, you know what? We're going to hold off just a little because we have no idea what's going to happen. We're still growing. Our revenues are amazing, but the whole world is cautious. So, okay, we'll take like a little cut, a 5% cut or a 20% cut or a 10% cut here. And if things look better, we're just going to keep adding to the budget. But for now, there's that weird dichotomy of like, the economy looks awful. It's going to be in a recession. We're going to keep psyching ourselves into a recession. And if we keep doing this, we will psych ourselves into a recession.
So are they back ending their budgets where it's just a pause in investment? So it may not be in fiscal Q1, Q2, but they can get that shiny toy or whatever to help grow their business in Q3, Q4? Or are they literally taking 10% from top line or 5%, and you just have to spend less in fiscal 23 or calendar 23?
We talked to a chief digital officer this morning. She basically said, look, we prioritized our list and we're not going to start anything that's on our lower priority. We're going to wait for things. And if we hit a certain threshold, we're going to keep investing. They know what their budget they want to do is. There's the budget that they're going to adhere to, unless if they're still growing at the rates that they're growing in the high double digits, they're going to keep adding because they're like, this is ridiculous. So people are being cautionary. When
was the last time you did a CXO business confidence survey where you saw evidence of budget cutbacks? When was the last time you recall that there was either a deliberate pause or an actual reduction in spend? 2 years, 5 years?
Q2 2020. People
thought
they were going to do that at the beginning of the pandemic. And then by Q4, they had doubled down on tech. Right. It was like full on tech spending because they didn't have a chance. You go digital or you die. And that was where we were.
Yeah. And you don't think that's still true? Do you think businesses have caught up where if they're not investing in a modern tech stack that they can compete and win? Or is this just, this is the nature
they have to play catch up. They may hire less people and put more into technology. All I can see is tech spending is still going to be good for quite some time. There'll be some rationalization with vendors. That's what we talked about. People are starting contract negotiations, trying to reduce some cost structure. But at the end of the day, they know this is the way to scale because they can't hire enough people and they don't have the talent in front of them. So they're going to scale with tech.
How can we get access to the survey?
It's actually available on the website. Just fill it out. Go to constellationr.com and you can get to the survey. And a copy can be sent out to folks.
Excellent. Okay. This wraps up this week's episode. Next week, we are episode 303. We have Jonathan
Wow.
Reichen. Me too. I know. When I hear that, it's like, that's amazing. We're getting close to 1,000 interviews, Ray. We have to celebrate the 1,000th interview. Maybe a giveaway. Maybe we give your book away to the 1,000th interview.
we get a limited mug with you and I, and with a new picture.
Yeah. We have Dr. Jonathan Reichenthal, founder, professor, and author. He's going to talk about his new book. This is an honor. We have Senator Phil Gramm. Senator Phil Gramm, author of The Myth of American Inequality, How Government Biases Policy Debate. And we have Linda Yates, author of The Unicorn Within. So 3 extraordinary authors, 1 long-serving senator.
Yes.
So it's going to be an amazing show. If it's Friday, DisrupTV. Ray, closing remarks.
It's been amazing. We had 2 amazing authors about leadership growth, thought leaders in their fields, thought leaders outside of their fields. I think it's really important to learn these lessons as we are starting to see changing markets, changing conditions. It's going to be useful to actually work within yourself, right? Learn more about yourself, how people react to you, and build those skill sets. Growth is still going to be super important. Your ability to actually inspire others and lead is going to be important. Like you and I were sitting in a room once and we're like looking around, we're like, holy crap, we're the adults. And then we're like, oh crap, it's us. What happened? Like, we're now in charge, right? So we better get some leadership chops. Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble. Take action, get some leadership in place, and focus on growth. But hey, with that, thanks a lot for being on the show. Happy holidays. And of course, we have 2 more episodes to go. So welcome.
See you next week.